Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We're back from vacation a week away in Maui, and no pods. So we no shows for the last week. So I appreciate you guys letting me get away with my wife for a week and a fun time in Maui. So I'm refreshed and we're back and ready to dive back into this daily Tennessee Vols and national sports podcast. So without further ado, we've got a fun show for you guys today. It is the Monday, July 22nd, 2024 edition of the program. So you know what that means. Fellow University of North Georgia alumni and my good friend Matt Green is on for a pod divided college football show from a Tennessee Vol and Georgia Bulldogs expert take on the college football landscape. We talk about SEC Media Days over this past week in Dallas and what to make of Tennessee coming in at number 7 in the picks for the week, and why that still just doesn't really add up with the way folks are talking about them, and what Tennessee's potential and personnel looks like going into this year, and why I make the case as to why that just doesn't work. Similar to kind of preseason 2022 stuff. So we get into that in just a little bit. We thought we continue on our SEC main characters list here. So we did the East a few weeks ago. You can check that out here on the program. If you missed that a few weeks ago, this week we're doing the West. I know the West division is gone, but we're still going to talk about the West and plus Oklahoma here going into the 2024 college football season. Talk about Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, who has the biggest flop potential, because it seems like it's chalk, those three being the best on that side of things. And as we know, this sport is rarely that simple and things go according to plan. So who of those three has the biggest potential to not live up to the extremely high preseason expectations going into this upcoming season? Don't forget, folks, this is a daily Tennessee Vols and national sports show, and you can find us on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube right now, thank you so much for making the Chase Thomas podcast part of your day. You can subscribe and comment below on what you think of the show and all that good stuff. If you have not already done so, we're right at 2,000 subscribers, so we should get there in the next couple days here on the YouTube channel. So make sure you're locked in and subscribed on the YouTube channel if you are not already and want to watch this very show. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you get your podcasts. And if you're listening via one of those platforms, please make sure you leave this show a 5-star rating and a review, letting other people know why you like the show and why you think they might like it too. It helps other people find this very show, and it helps this very show continue to grow. You can also check us out on the webpage, chasethomaspodcast.com, for more information about the show and everything we got cooking here on the podcast. And you can email us. So if you have any questions for me or Matt Green for future college football questions, you can do so. Reach out to us at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on all the social medias, Pod Chase Thomas on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ChaseThomasWriter, and all that good stuff. So if you're not already, look us up on the socials. Make sure you're locked in on all those. Send us an email if you want to get in touch with the show or have any future college football or Tennessee Vols questions for myself or Matt Green. chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. All right, Uncle Darren, let's go.
Chase Thomas the Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, welcome back. Chase Thomas podcast, taping this on a Sunday evening, fresh back from Maui, Hawaii, a week away. So no pod for the last week, but we're back. We're back in the saddle. We're like 40 days from Tennessee kicking back off here for the 2024 college football season. It'll be here before you know it. We're like a week and a half, 2 weeks from start of fall camp here all across the board in SEC country. And to talk all about college football, as we do at this time each and every week, it's my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green, is here. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. We are 40 days away from that first Saturday of college football season. Week 1, the real first Saturday. Week 0 is nice little tease, but yeah, man, I'm excited.
Do you know if Georgia or Clemson are the home team in that game yet? Are you wearing white or red in that game?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. We'll have to look into that. I feel like aesthetically, see, Clemson just needs to ditch the white pants. Can I get my uniform? My uniform, what do you want to call it? Shtick.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to ditch the
High
white
horse.
pants. Yeah, high horse. There you go. I know they rock them for like every championship game, quote unquote. So the state championship for South Carolina, they rock orange pants. ACC championship, they rock orange pants, and then like in the playoff, they rock orange pants. But when they're the road team, orange, white, orange, it's like that's a way better uniform than the white pants they rock. They just need to ditch them altogether. But yeah, I don't know. I wish Georgia, who knows, come out in the black. That would be awesome. But with this new NCAA football game, I feel like it's gotten all the Georgia fans' hopes. It's like, oh, the black jerseys do exist. I can wear them on the game. Let's wear them in real life. So it's just going to get our hopes up again. But yeah, I'll have to look into that. At some point, they got to announce that, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, well, the last time I think Clemson wore orange, right? It was Georgia white, Clemson orange a couple years ago with
Oh, that's a
DJ.
good point. Yeah, so Georgia's definitely the home team because
Okay.
it's like a pseudo neutral site, right?
Yeah.
Like the first one was Charlotte. It's kind of Clemson's home. So yeah, you're right. Georgia would definitely be the home team at least in that game.
Okay. And then Clemson, like you said, I don't like the all white Clemson. Like the all white Stormtrooper uniforms for Tennessee has always looked really good. But I think Clemson, the orange pants or even the purple pants with the white shirt and the orange helmet just looks better
Yeah,
than their
Tennessee's
all
got a
white.
different look with the white helmet. It's
Yeah.
yeah, the Clemson, I don't know. The orange pants, they look a lot better. So, but yeah, I'm excited, man. 40 days till college football season. Who's Tennessee open with?
UT Chattanooga.
There we go. The Mocs.
And it's not on a Thursday night this time, which is really, really frustrating because I've gotten really used to the opener on the Thursday night SEC network. My wife and I can slide in there. It's not a big deal. It's very laid back. And then I get to focus on all the other games after Tennessee wins by 40. Like I can just kind of cruise into Saturday. I don't have to allocate 3.5 hours of my time to a game that Tennessee is going to win handedly. I want to watch the bigger games. I want to watch the week one big boys. And now I'm going to, because Tennessee plays UTC in that, I think, noon slot that first Saturday in week one. I'm going to have.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to have multiple TVs going. I'm going to have multiple screens going as that one
Yeah,
goes
when
on.
you have one of those games, I'm with you. I feel like you might as well play on that Thursday or Friday night, kind of be all eyes on you. Because that's the thing I was thinking about. I think a lot of Georgia fans were salty. Georgia fans in general just get triggered by the noon kickoff. I feel like they just it's when it's at home, it's a little different. Like as Georgia fans, they just for some reason Sanford Stadium gets few night games. I think there is a reason. I think it's binge drinking related, but I think a lot of fans are really salty when they get that noon kickoff. But the more I think about it, it's like Georgia Clemson is going to be the first game of the college football season that everyone is watching. Like people are going to be tuned into College Game Day and just keep on watching for college football season to start, essentially. And so many eyes are going to be on Georgia Clemson just at the very start, just to kick off the college football season.
Yeah, we're close, man. I'm really, really getting excited. And we're in the doldrums here, and the Braves are falling apart. So their season just getting worse and worse by the day with Albies and Freed
Heads
now.
are falling off.
Yeah, like it's time to make the transition. We're all ready to flip the page to the start of the college football season.
When SEC Network does these school takeover for like the whole day, like I don't know who's in charge of this content. Worst content of all time. Like,
please explain. Why are you against
this? With all
this?
due respect to all the other sports that play in college sports, no one's going to want to watch a replay of some regular season baseball game, some regular season softball game from a year ago. Like if you're going to sit down and watch reruns of old games, it's going to be football games. Like people would sit around. I was actually today, SEC Rewind. I'll give SEC Network a shout out for this show. SEC Rewind, they condensed it to 2 hours. You should condense a replay to 1 hour. Let's be honest. It's football. There's a lot of downtime. We can condense this bad boy to an hour if we're reminiscing about some 2014 game, right? But they did condense this down to 2 hours. I was watching 2010 Alabama, South Carolina when they upset Alabama, and then 1998 Florida, Tennessee, when Tennessee finally beat Florida after several losses in a row. And it's like, I was like, I would watch content like that all the time in the off season if SEC Network put it on. Just classic games, like reminisce about old players. Like it was good stuff. But the when they do the day takeover, there's like 2 football games in the 24 hours, and then it's like a women's basketball game, a regular season men's game from the previous year, a softball game, a soccer game. It's like no one's gonna watch this on rerun. But if you showed in a 24-hour period, like had like 12 classic Georgia games, just 2 hour, like some of in the 90s, some in the 2000s. I would record all of them. I would try to get around to watching like all of those at some point.
This is the most antithetical thing to everything school HQ I've ever heard. This is the state of the University of Georgia's athletic program as a whole, summed up here by
No.
Matt Green, that he can't immediately go to the baseball season, immediately go to the basketball season of any recent seasons and go, man, I'd love to relive that game. You know what I'd like to go back and watch, and Tennessee fans are happy to go back and watch? Dalton Connect going off against Auburn that in the regular season. They want to go back
No, they're
and,
not gonna
you know what they
watch
want to do?
that.
All the different gigantic moments over the last 4 years in the baseball run here by Tony Vitello is the best team in the sport. You know who people are more than happy to go back and watch? They're going to want to watch those games. Lady softball winning a lot of in that regard. There's been some big time games there. And you said football. This is the great thing about everything school HQ. This is not a gripe from the good folks here in Knoxville, Tennessee, Matt Green. This is a Georgia fan thing. I don't think you speak for
No.
the masses on this in this regard, sir. I think
I would
people
like to
are
see the
happy.
ratings. I'd like to see the ratings they're getting. I understand, like, you're the SEC network, like, you're going to show live sports while baseball season and soccer season are going on. Yeah, you're showing them live, but these just aren't things that people are going to rewatch.
Mm,
And classic football games, like, people would actually watch those. And
yeah.
I don't know, maybe a classic Final Four game or something if it's a big time college basketball game. But
You'll get there, man.
I don't
Everything
think
school
people are
HQ,
going to be
it's not for everybody.
rewatching. I don't think people are rewatching that. That's just me. I'm
Mm.
telling the people at SEC Network, just show classic games, condense them down to an hour. People would watch them.
Man, I don't think Tennessee fans comment in the YouTube comments here about this one because this seems like a Georgia fan gripe here.
Go look at the Tennessee one. I don't know what, maybe it's already happened.
It did already happen, I
If you
think.
see the schedule for the Tennessee, the 24-hour block, go tell me honestly how many of those things you'd want to get on your DVR.
I don't know. DVR. Matt Green, this is old man yelling at the cloud. His DVR over here. He's oh man. And then this is such an old man thing to complain about.
You get this sentiment.
Matt, you could go on YouTube and watch all of these things whenever you want. Like you don't have to sit there and wait for the SEC network to do their SEC takeover. You can relive the Georgia games and just Chromecast it to your TV. Do whatever, man. Like you don't have to.
I do. I'm just trying to help the good folks at SEC Network out because free programming advice right here. That's all I'm saying.
What's the number one pick for you for Georgia? If you could put like one Georgia classic that you think would be the most wanted rewatch of all Georgia fans right now, what do you think would be the most popular number one pick football game wise? Who is around our age? Let's say that maybe.
I feel like I can't just do one. I got to come up with a list or something.
No, you got to do one off the top of your head. What would be your best guess?
I mean, the national championship to beat Alabama. I think that has to be the first.
Let's throw that one out. That's the obvious one. When you
break out all playoff games,
because I mean, I think Ohio State, Georgia. Like I would say, Ohio State, Georgia was more fun to go back and watch. I think Oklahoma, Georgia too. Yeah,
Ohio State, and the Peach Bowl, and Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. I feel like those are definitely, along with Alabama national championship, like obviously those are like the biggest games that Georgia's won. But like you go back to like the 2013 LSU, like that game that was a shootout. Like you just watch something like that, like the Georgia Florida game back in 2007. Like just kind of classic games that you just remember forever. 2002 Auburn, Michael Johnson, the fourth and whatever, the pass from David Green, like the hobnail boot play versus Tennessee back in 2001. Like if you just showed those type games for 24 hours straight, like people would love that. That gets the people going.
It's interesting. I would be curious to know what Georgia. I mean, you didn't mention, is the Michael Johnson catch so far removed from memory that one's just kind of lost? lost in the archives for Georgia fans. Like, how many Georgia fans now even remember? Because that was just a crazy catch and a crazy moment in Jordan Hare with David Green way back when.
For sure. And I mean, that's what like sealed the SEC championship too,
Yeah.
because Georgia lost to Florida that year. So they wouldn't have had the tiebreaker. So that they needed that play to get in the SEC championship. So it was massive. I mean, that was the Georgia's first SEC championship in like 20 years at that point. So I mean, it was a pretty big deal year two of Mark Richt and everything. And I mean, they finished number 2, I guess, in the final AP poll in 07, but they finished 3 in 2002. So I mean, that's like basically as close. And he finished number 3 in 2012 too, right? After they lost to Alabama. So like that was one of the 2 or 3 closest Mark Richt ever got to winning a national championship. So I mean, before Kirby came around, this generation of Georgia fans, like that was as good as it got. Was like 2012 having your heart broken that you were 4 yards away from playing a team that you think you would have beaten in the national championship, but you didn't actually get there. So things have definitely changed. You enjoyed just those regular season games because that like 2013 LSU game I mentioned, like that was just an all-time great game. And even Tennessee that year with Aaron Murray when he just like put the team on his back, like those were like all-time great like games in terms of just regular season, like emotion and all of that. But nothing even came from those. So it wasn't until Kirby Smart got here that the big wins are actually winning championships.
Yeah. I like it. Matt Green, transitioning here a little bit. We had SEC Media Days in Dallas this past week. Seemed like it was a lot of fun watching different interviews and a lot of folks jumping onto different shows and listen. I was tuned into different content and different people talking, and it was interesting. Everyone's feeling optimistic. Like this is the optimistic season where everyone feels like, hey, this could be our year. If this goes right here. Optimism is just nice. There's a lot of positivity right now all across the SEC, outside of maybe Vanderbilt fans. It's pretty optimistic all across the board before the games get started. I thought what was most interesting here with the SEC media picks, now it's weird seeing 16 and weird seeing Texas and Oklahoma. That's going to take some getting used to here. But I have some gripe here, Matt Green. I have some gripe. And I think I've touched on this before. And it's something that I think college football, specifically SEC analysts, are going to struggle with Tennessee all year long. And it's something that's going to drive me nuts all year long. It's part of the reason why I predicted Tennessee to go 10-2. You were on this podcast. You can validate my exact game wins and losses turning out to be exactly right. And that before the 2022 season happened, my reasoning, rationale for it. And a lot of folks were on the fence where they were like, oh, if it goes right, 8-4, 9-3. No one was just going to go, hey, if they have the best offense in like they could have the best offense, but I still just don't feel good enough about putting them at 10-2, 11-1, that kind of range. History might be repeating itself here, Matt Green, a little bit, where I'm seeing every like smart college football analyst, writer, fan be excited about Nico Iamaleava. Everyone I'm seeing is just like, man, I just can't wait to watch Nico play. I think he's going to be the one. Everything I'm hearing, Nico is going to be awesome. I think Nico is going to be a Heisman finalist. I think Nico is going to be right there, one of the best in the conference. But then we're going to put Tennessee at 7, like right there in the middle of the pack of the SEC. Oh man, James Pierce. He's the best defensive lineman. And then we have Cole Kubelik talking about Tennessee as the best defensive line in the SEC this year. Tennessee, I think he had them as a top 5 offensive line in the conference this year. If Tennessee has one of the best offensive lines, the best defensive line, maybe even the best quarterback, upside, like he can be the best quarterback in the conference. How are you still all collectively putting Tennessee at number 7? Why is everyone so scared to just like put the wins there? Like if you believe all of this to be true about Tennessee, you've already seen them go 10-2 with a less deep team. And look, I love Hendon Hooker to death. I think Jalen Hyatt was a special player in the slot for Tennessee. And I think it's going to be hard to replicate that kind of speed and what he did. But you can't have one without the other. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I'm seeing this over and over again, Matt Green, because I'm like, you can't have one without the other. Like if Tennessee is all of those things, and we know how important the trenches are, and we know how important the quarterback play is to success in this sport, Tennessee is going to win double-digit games this year. If Nico is that guy, they're winning double-digit games again. They're going to be in the top 4 in the conference. Like, offense wins out. Look at how this conference goes. Like, offense is the number one way to move up the top of this conference. Like, we know it's an offensively driven sport now. Yeah, like the Georgia in the world, and like when you get to the finals of the playoffs, like that matters. You saw Ohio State. They had to make the adjustment to Jim Knowles, and that was huge for them. The defense was great last year. But the reason they didn't make that leap last year, guess what? Kyle McCord was not the guy. The offense struggled. They weren't legit. They lost to Michigan. They don't go to the CFP. Year prior, CJ Stroud, Marvin Harrison, everybody, obviously they're in the playoff. Things are a little bit different. The point being, if you believe Tennessee's offense is going to be one of the best in the country, if you believe their offensive line, if they can stay healthy, is going to be one of the best in the country, if you believe their defensive line and their edge rusher is the best in the country, I don't know how we're still doing 7th. How are we still putting Mizzou in front of them? How are we putting LSU, who lost everybody, in front of them? How are we still putting so many of these schools in front of Tennessee right now? I don't get it, Matt Green. I don't think you can have one without the other. Am I taking crazy pills here?
Well, the one thing I'll say is no one's necessarily predicting that Nico is the best quarterback in the SEC right now. Like, it's more of he's the 5-star shiny new toy that everyone wants to see, and he could be amazing. James Pierce is like, yeah, right now this guy's like the best pass rusher in the SEC, and this defensive line was very improved last year, and they could be even better again this year. So like the defense was significantly better in 2023 than it was in 2022, but it was the offense that wasn't as good. Mm. And so you do still have a first-year starting quarterback, even if he does have all the potential in the world. There is still some question marks, I think, around Tennessee's just overall 2024 expectations. And Missouri, I think baked in with the Missouri thing is their schedule, because it's low-key a pretty favorable schedule. I think at Alabama is it at Alabama or is that home?
I think that one's at Alabama.
I have to look at it. But like that's the most difficult game on their schedule. And it's not that we're discounting how good Alabama is going to be, but I think 2024, if there's ever a year that you would like to play at Alabama, it's going to be 2024, because it's a transition year. They lost a lot to the portal. Like, you have a feeling once Kalen DeBoer gets this thing back up and going, like Alabama's going to improve. So 2024, Alabama could be the best team in the country. Like, we don't know, but Missouri is used to just having a ceiling kind of on what they can do, because they get matched up with someone like Georgia in the East. So I think their schedule is part of, I think, them being ahead of Tennessee in the projections.
That's fine. But LSU, Tennessee beat them 2 years ago. I think Tennessee is still in a better spot than LSU. LSU's replacing a Heisman quarterback.
2 years ago. That's forever ago.
It was on the road. I'm just saying, like, Heupel 1-0 against Brian Kelly in the SEC on the road. I think right now you can't put LSU ahead of Tennessee coming into this year. I just don't think you can. And then Ole Miss, I get. I think Ole Miss, all the firepower's there. I don't really have a problem with that one. But I think Missouri and LSU, to me, I don't think they have the ceiling that Tennessee does. If you believe Tennessee has the best defensive line in the SEC, the highest upside quarterback, and a top 3, top 5 at worst healthy offensive line. Like, I think that's a recipe for tremendous success in this sport. I just do. So
I mean, as long as we're talking about other results, like past results, like Missouri did, kind of beat the brakes off Tennessee a year ago. Like, Missouri,
and Tennessee beat the brakes off them 2 years ago, like at home. Like,
what's more relevant, last year or 2 years ago?
Well, it's last year. I mean, the offense, like you talked about, it was a road game, and like we'll see. We saw what happened when Tennessee's offense was back to normal under Heupel and what they did to Mizzou. Like, if you put them on a neutral site game, I think Tennessee would beat Missouri based on these two teams. I think Tennessee would beat them.
I'm really disappointed we're not getting Tennessee, Missouri in 2024.
And Tennessee, South Carolina. I mean, the fact that we're not getting both.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I would love to get Missouri on the regular season schedule, but I don't know. My thing is, folks, you can't have both without the other. So, like, I need someone. I guess I'll do it again. I guess I'll do it on July 21st, 2024, Matt Green. Tennessee's winning 10-plus games again in the regular season. Like, Tennessee, if they are healthy, if specifically the trenches, if they remain healthy, they're going to win 10-plus games. Nico is that good, and the offensive and defensive line are that good across the board. Like, I'm here. I'm just doing it. Like, folks, they're going to be a top 3 finish in the SEC.
So is Nico? I mean, yeah. I mean, if Nico is that good, I mean, that's just a huge if. I think that's
I don't think it's a
like
huge if.
just.
It's a huge if. Sellers at South Carolina being good, Brock Vandagriff being good at Kentucky. Those are huge. Like, I don't know, maybe the 5-star number 1 overall player in his class 2 years ago is not like a huge what if. Like, I don't think
In
that's.
fairness, Vandagriff was like a 5-star like 3 years ago. So I
Yeah,
mean,
but we haven't seen it. Like, he's really done nothing. We saw Nico play really well in the bowl game. We against the top 10 defense. Like, we've seen at least some of it, and there's a pedigree. Like, there is a lot. I mean, Brock was not the number 1 quarterback in his class. Like, there's a good.
I mean,
It's a good track record.
Let's not act like Nico just balled out on Iowa. Like it wasn't like it
good.
was. He had some moments, but it wasn't just all smooth sailings in that game by any means. But it's one game. It's the bowl game. Like bowl games are weird these days. I don't know what Iowa's roster was looking like. Maybe they had no one sitting out. But I think Caleb Williams was the number 1 quarterback in fairness in Vandagriff's class, and he's been behind.
How did Caleb Williams turn out in college?
But that's what I'm saying. So he's just behind Caleb Williams. So maybe he's the number 2 quarterback, but that's because the number 1 is a guy who was number 1 pick of the draft. Just the same way he's sitting behind Stetson Bennett and then Carson Beck. Like Carson Beck is also potentially the number 1 pick of the draft. So just because he's been behind those guys, like I agree. I'm not like projecting Brock Vandagriff is going to like be some Heisman candidate or anything, but it's interesting that we're not saying that at all about this former 5-star. But Nico, who we also haven't really seen play, is like, no, this guy's the guy. He's going to win the Heisman this year.
You sound scared, Matt Green. You're a little nervous about Nico Iamaleava coming to Athens here in November. A little nervous, it sounds like, Matt Green.
I mean, he's one of the bigger, X factors in the SEC this year because he could be average and show a lot of potential. Like you think of someone like Matthew Stafford as a true freshman, like, yeah, he showed a lot of signs, but he also threw a bunch of interceptions too. So you just never really know what you're getting with a first-year starter. He obviously is a sophomore, but he is still a first-year starter. And, he could be a superstar. We really don't know. But I feel like it is interesting. I feel like Tennessee fans are already convinced that he is the guy.
I think I'm going to trust Josh Heupel and Nico Iamaleava. I think it's
should we trust Josh Heupel? He was leaving Joe Milton in there last year.
Joe won 8 games.
See, that's the one thing. That's the one criticism I have of the Heupel tenure to this point is not seeing Nico for any meaningful games a year ago. Because it's one thing when you're not
look at the
playing,
freshman. The only 5-star freshman who did anything was Dante Moore, and he struggled. He passed I think his completion percentage was around 50% at UCLA. You don't see that much anymore.
But think about 2018 Georgia when you had Jake Fromm that just previously played in the national championship, and then in 2018, I don't know. There's revisionist history about how mediocre Fromm was. 2018, Fromm was a baller. Like he was one of the best quarterbacks, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country that year. And you still heard all this about Justin Fields putting him in the game, and that's when the quarterback was playing really well. So when Joe Milton is not playing well, I can't imagine why you didn't see meaningful snaps from Nico a year ago. And maybe that means he just really wasn't ready. And if he really wasn't ready last year, it's hard for me to say, okay, he's going to be a Heisman finalist this year. Like that's just a big swing. I don't know. He could show a lot of improvement in 1 year, but I don't know. That's the one thing that makes me a little cautious on Nico.
I don't know, man. I feel pretty good about it. Top 3 in the 2021 class was Drake May, Caleb Williams, Quinn Ewers. Sam Heward was in that group. You throw in, let's see. I'm keeping going here. Bryce Young, 2020, DJU, obviously not great. The 2020 class was weird, but number 1 overall, Bryce Young. Obviously, I've talked about Nico being.
We see 5-star quarterbacks pan out and not pan out all the time. So it's like you never know.
You never know, but you still feel pretty good about it. It's a good gamble. I would say good gamble overall. Speaking of,
but yeah, if people had him second team, if they had him like second team All SEC and they're picking Tennessee 7th, then I'm with you. But I feel like there is still a question mark, and I think people are afraid to maybe say Tennessee's actually going to be the real deal. Because I mean, we didn't even say everybody. Like Georgia had 165 of the first place votes. Texas had 27, Alabama with 12. and then Ole Miss with 4. And I think everyone kind of agrees on those top 4. But then after that, it's kind of, I think that's where you expect Tennessee to be the head of that group.
Well, can I throw this at you? Because I don't think it's going to be chalk like this. So of the 3, Matt Green, because I don't think Ole Miss belongs in that yet. We'll have to see if Lane Kiffin can prove that. They did well in the portal again. Let's just see. Let me see Lane Kiffin get in the SEC title game with Ole Miss. And it's not a Lane Kiffin thing. Lane Kiffin's awesome. I'm pro Lane Kiffin. It's more of an Ole Miss in the history of Ole Miss thing. Like, I understand the back-to-back double-digit win seasons, but I need to see Ole Miss make that final leap as a program before I can throw them in with the Bamas, the Texases, and the Georgias. Of those 3, though, Matt Green, who do you think is the most likely not to live up to the hype going into this year? Bama, Texas, or Georgia?
That's a good question, because like obviously the recruiting that Alabama's doing right now, like this is not stuff that's going to impact the 2024 team. But I feel like it's giving Kalen DeBoer and like people confidence in the administration, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like Alabama, I don't know. I guess I just kind of have confidence that an offensive guy like Kalen DeBoer is going to kind of get the best out of Jalen Milroe, because I think Jalen Milroe is kind of a flawed quarterback, but he's also a very dynamic quarterback. And like if you can design a really dynamic offense with his abilities, maybe hiding his shortcomings. And I think Kalen DeBoer is a guy who can potentially do that. So it's hard for me to say Alabama's going to disappoint. Like, part of me wants to say Texas, because it is the first year in the SEC, but I think they might be that good right now. So I don't know. Of those 3, I'm definitely not going to say Georgia. I think Georgia is just complete on both sides, and they should be, one of the contenders at the end of the season, even though they do have to go on the road at Texas and at Alabama. But if I'm picking between those 3, I guess I would say Alabama.
That's interesting. I wouldn't pick Alabama. I think it's Texas.
Who are you picking?
I think I'm kind of worried about Texas at this point now, where you could see like the weird stuff that could happen if Quinn can't stay healthy again. I'm curious, like what happens, like the horns down, it's happening, that Texas is going to be faced with some adversity here. I think them talking about being everybody's Super Bowl and stuff like that, like, I don't know. I think Texas, like I've been very pro Texas in this program for the last few years. I think Steve Sarkisian's a good coach. I think they're moving in the right direction. They made the playoff. Like, they deserve a lot of credit for getting over the hump. I'm a little concerned about just this. Let's pencil in Texas to go back to back and make it to the CFP again. And they've penciled in the date between the Dogs and the Longhorns. I think Texas is pushing to get to that, what Kirby's built in the next 2 to 3 years. I think they're knocking on the door to being at that level, recruiting wise, portal wise, wins wise. Like, they're close to what Georgia is. But I'm just kind of nervous about what it's going to look like for Texas. And if they get upset early, or I don't know. Like, I'm just very curious what happens with this program if they get knocked in the mouth early in the SEC. Like, do they come together as a team of like, we're going to be okay, we're built for this league, we belong here? Or does it go the opposite way? There was finger pointing, or it's like, this team might unravel because of just the amount of pressure that is on Texas to be the class of the SEC with Georgia before even playing an SEC game. Like, I'm very curious how they handled that. Remember, they lost to Oklahoma last year. Like, they didn't even, like, everyone's worried about Oklahoma in the conference. Oklahoma won that game. I don't know. Like, I think Texas, to me, has the most room to flop of the 3. Like, Alabama, like, yeah, sure, new coach. Kalen DeBoer's won a lot of regular season games. Nick Saban's got the field. He's going to be around. I think Kalen DeBoer's staff, he hired really well. I think Bama is going to be ultimately fine. Like, I'm not really worried about Bama flopping with Kalen DeBoer and everything. Like, I think their floor is probably 9-3 this year.
But it could be a matter of, they won a lot of one-score games the last couple years, and they've got the best coach in the history of the sport. And when you don't have the best coach in the history of the sport, maybe you lose some of those one-score games. And they're a really good team that's winning 8-9 games because they just can't get over that hump or something. Like, there's definitely a reason.
Think about like the game at Michigan, right? In their second week. You drop that one if you're Texas, suddenly you have to like run the gauntlet in the SEC maybe to feel good and feel secure making the playoff, right? Like, you might, like, you kind of sneaky. you kind of really need that, huh?
Because it's a non-conference loss.
No, I
I mean,
understand, but I'm
it's
just
hard to
saying that,
take.
like, it's just pressure. If you lose, like, it's not a bad loss to lose at Michigan, but then you're already behind the 8 ball going into the
Yeah.
conference play, and then you still go to Oklahoma. You still have the Oklahoma game, neutral site. You open with Mississippi State at home. That's good. But in Dallas against Oklahoma and Georgia back to back, I think you're splitting that. And then who knows, at A&M for the rivalry game at the end of the year, where the CFP might be on the line for them, that like the Texas A&M game might decide whether or not Texas makes the CFP. I mean, and that's on the road in College Station. So I don't know. Texas to me has the most flop potential of the three. I think Georgia's the safest. I think I'm buying back in on Bama a little bit here before the regular season, and I think Texas is the most volatile. Or I could see Texas winning the SEC, and I could also see Texas finishing like 5th in their debut season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I was thinking this watching SEC media days because like if we got a dose, if we got even like a 10% of what the Big 12 has dealt with the last however 25 years, 30 years with Texas being in their conference, I can understand why those people hate Texas because it is when they said they were going to be everybody's Super Bowl, I kind of like, it's kind of an eye roll was my first, reaction. Like it's the SEC. Like you guys don't even understand week in, week out how many big games there are. But then I started thinking like it actually might be the Super Bowl with how much they've talked. It might be that game that everybody circled. And is Texas ready to be that team that everybody circles on the schedule? Like Alabama and Nick Saban, like they've proven for years that they could be that game. And Kirby Smart with Georgia, like they've proven they can be the team that's the hunted. Obviously, Kirby's going to say they're always the hunters, right? But they've proven that they can be that team with the bullseye and still walk into your place, take your best shot, and walk out with a win. I'm not sure Texas is necessarily ready for that bullseye. Like in terms of teams, like, yeah, last year's team, I'm sure they were just as good as Georgia. And maybe this year's team is just as good as Georgia. I don't know that they're the program that Georgia is to this point of what you can just expect year in and year out. And that's where the SEC is just different. Like, I think it's kind of crazy where we are right now with how Oklahoma has just dominated that conference for the last 20 years. And we're going the first year these two teams are in the SEC and talking about Texas could win the SEC. It's just kind of crazy where these two programs have gone in a couple years. But I look at Texas and what they could be this year, and like they had some close games with TCU. Was it TCU they went to overtime with last year? Like there's just year in and year out, they have some close games. And obviously the Big 12 is a competitive conference, and they've definitely, ramped up the level of their recruiting the last few years. But it's a different beast in the SEC. And I didn't even realize until you said that Oklahoma and Georgia back to back on the schedule. Like that's something that they've never had to deal with. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a history of like Texas having like a letdown game after that Oklahoma game because there is so much like just emotion that goes into that rivalry. I'll have to look into that though.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% on that.
Well, Matt Green, it'll be interesting. I mean, by and large, the SEC media picks to put a bow on it. Vanderbilt obviously last. I will throw the. Well, no, I'm going to say that because we're going to talk about the main characters and all that stuff here. So I'll save that because it's going to come up in this portion. So the theme of tonight's show here, Matt Green, SEC main characters, the West Side, formerly the West Division here, no longer with Oklahoma. We're throwing in here. We threw Texas in the East a few weeks ago when we did the Eastern portion of the Southeastern Conference as our preview rolls along here, Matt Green, and the main character series continues on. So tonight, let's kick things off with the Alabama Crimson Tide here. Your main character for the 2024 football season for Alabama will be who?
Well, it's obviously easy to pick the quarterback, Jalen Milroe, but I'm going to go a different route. And I'm going to go with who we think is going to be the starting running back, former 5-star Justice Haynes. I think he's going to be the ultimate X factor in this Alabama offense this year because as great as the quarterback play has been in recent years for Alabama, they've gotten away from having that dominant running game. And I think with Jalen Milroe's limitations as a vertical passer, like I think if they start just getting in the option game and just, become just a dangerous running game, because that's the biggest thing with Jalen Milroe. You look at how like kind of the guys he's compared to just athletically, like the Lamar Jacksons of the world. Like Lamar Jackson was running for like 1,600 yards. Like Cam Newton ran for like 1,400 yards. Like these guys were elite, had elite rushing production. So Milroe, as dynamic of an athlete as he was, what do you have, like 400 yards, like 500 yards rushing a year ago? Like it was not the most rushing production. So their running production was not good, even though they had a running quarterback. So I think if you have that true dynamic home run hitter in the backfield, I think it just opens up things for Jalen Milroe and this passing game. And this Alabama offense is going to be that much more difficult to stop. So Justice Haynes, I think they got to have that game breaker in the run game.
I think they have Jam Miller too. It's a great running back name. Jam Miller is just, he's going to be good at Alabama. Like,
and
Jam
the other
Miller?
5-star, Richard Young, I know was a 5-star at some point too. So I mean, that backfield should be loaded. But
well,
Jace
that's what's
McClellan
interesting
was
because
just a guy. He wasn't anything like special, like what Alabama's had. Like he wasn't nearly on like Jahmyr Gibbs's level, like a true like home run hitter.
What would you guess Washington's rushing offense was last year ranked in the country?
Oh man, I know that dude. I'm blanking on his name last year. He was a workhorse.
The Mississippi State transfer?
Yeah, well, in the country, I don't know, probably top 40, top 30.
106th.
Oh man, way off. Samsonite.
Year prior for Kalen DeBoer at Washington, 69th. They haven't really prioritized running the football up there in Seattle. So I'm curious because the identity with Alabama, I mean, it obviously changed a little bit with Bill O'Brien and the Bryce Youngs of the world. And then part of it was just like you had elite wide receiver play, right? Like, I think that's what's so interesting about the Bama conversation where you talk about like they have these blue chippers at running back, and that's just traditionally what they've been so good and what they've been, that dynasty was built around the early 2010s. What I think is so interesting is how much Kalen DeBoer evolves, right? Like you kept the same RB coach when you came in, Gillespie, so he's still there. You bring in Nick Sheridan. Ryan Grubb doesn't come down with you as OC. He's now the OC of the Seahawks. I'm curious how much of this all looks different than what we saw in Washington. Does he have Jalen Milroe throw as much and sit in the pocket like he did with Penix? The problem is you had 3 NFL wide receivers at UW. Bama, one of the underrated, overlooked reasons as to why Bama has struggled and not won a national title in the last couple of years, yeah, a lot of it's on the defense and Pete Golding, and we can talk about that. But a lot of it's just they've lost dudes out wide. They don't have those superstar game breakers out wide that change games, like that were just impossible to defend. Like Ohio State has those guys now every year. Georgia's had those guys at tight end. They don't have those guys anymore. They haven't had those game wreckers. It's what happened to Clemson, right? Like Clemson hasn't had anybody on the outside that scared you like a Mike Williams in forever. The Hunter Renfros, who were just really, really good and really, really hard to stop. Bama hasn't had that. And I mean, Jalen Burton's fine, but like he wasn't someone who scared Georgia fans or scared SEC teams week over week. Isaiah Bond, whoever. I'm curious how that works because everyone's talking about Jalen Milroe, Justice Haynes, but like, what is Kalen DeBoer going to do? Is he going to actually elevate some of these guys? Are we going to learn that it was actually more of Alabama's previous coaching staff wasn't getting the most out of some talented receivers, or does Alabama run into real problems because the stuff that DeBoer wants to do at Alabama, he just doesn't have the receivers yet. Like he has Ryan Williams coming in, but he's a true freshman. Like, I don't know. I'm very curious what the wide receiver situation looks like and how much Bama runs the ball and how much DeBoer evolves and kind of maybe leans on the run game more just because he doesn't have the dudes out wide. Like Justice Haynes should be a big factor. Jay Miller should be a big factor. Jalen Milroe with his legs should be a big factor. But that's not what they were doing with Penix. Penix was a pocket quarterback. Like that's not something we saw at UW the last few years. So I'm very, very curious how that all meshes. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt. I think, but at the end of the day, I think every coach's job is to get the best out of the talent he has. And if you're going to Alabama and you don't make running game a priority, like you're not using the advantages that they have on their roster. They got some big old offensive linemen and they got some dynamic running backs. So, and then you have a running quarterback as well. So like you're going to have a dynamic running game. And then that's why you trust Kalen DeBoer to, maybe make it as easy as possible on Jalen Milroe with his scheme. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't have the personnel out wide that Washington has. So you're gonna have to figure out a way to make it work.
I mean, Jeremy Bernard this will be school 3 for him. Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice. That's scaring anybody in the SEC right now? Is that scaring anyone?
I will say, who's it? Ryan Williams, the 5-star true freshman coming in. Like, who knows? That guy could be a game changer from day one.
But that's asking a lot of a true freshman. Like, I like Amari Jefferson out of
sure.
Tennessee here, Caleb Odom. Like, they have dudes coming in, but I mean, Caleb Cunningham, that was a big 5-star win for Alabama on the trail last week. Like, I'm not worried about the future and the talent that he's bringing in. I'm talking just strictly this year. Like, I just think the receivers that are going to play this year are not going to separate. And I think Bama is going to have a subpar receiving core this year. Like, that's just, unless you play a lot of freshmen, but I don't see that happening.
No, and it's hard to trust freshmen for sure. Ryan Williams, he reclassified though, so he is on this year's this year's team.
Super young though. I don't know. I would be surprised if he's a big factor right away here. We shall see. Mine though, I'll say, Matt Green, Kane Womack, and I don't think it's Womack. We always thought it was Womack, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Womack. And obviously South Carolina.
Hey, you steered me wrong on Aiden Childs, so I can't.
That's true.
I don't know. I can't trust you.
That's fair. But comes in from South Alabama. Successful there. I think that's a sneaky underrated one that I'm so curious, because you talked about Pete Golding over the last few years, and I think he's been good and been what Ole Miss needed. But I don't think I sent you that stat of the difference between the title teams with Bama with Pruitt and Kevin Steele versus what you saw, or Kirby Smart, excuse me, to what it looked like with Pete Golding. Like there was a huge drop off, and that was part of the reason that Alabama just has not. We talk about the reasons they haven't won a title in half a decade. That's some of, like, we're fine. Those are some of the little things that have kind of eroded and had eroded the last few.
They have one title in the last half decade.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is going in. That was in the 2020 season. Like, we're going into the 2025 season right here, Matt Green. Once the season wraps up,
we're in 2024.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're nearing half a decade. I'm saying nearing half a decade. Like, after this season, if they don't win, it's half a decade.
I'm eager for Alabama's demise as much as the next guy, but it's only been three seasons have been played since their last championship.
So I don't know. It feels like 7. Anyway,
but yeah, they have one title in the last 6 years. Like that's way different than the peak Saban dynasty for sure.
I mean, that's what we were saying about Clemson, right? Clemson fans were like, "Hey, we can't win it every year," and then you're like, "Okay, well, we're getting a little bit longer here. We're at year 5. We're at year 6." And then you're like, "Are you sure you're still pumped? Like, I think it's over." Like, at what point do you just go, "The run's over"? Like, this is just kind of who you are now. But I think Kane Womack is a really interesting hire, because if that's a home run for Kalen DeBoer, that's a game changer for them. Like, I think if he's the guy, because I mean, getting a sitting D1 head coach like Kane, I don't know. I'm very curious how that works at Alabama. So I know everyone's going to be looking at the offense. What if he gets that defense to back, not exactly what it was with Pruitt and Kirby Smart? I think that's asking too much. But what if he gets somewhere in the middle of those Kirby defenses and what we saw the last few years of Pete Golding? What if he's able to elevate them to that middle portion of what that is? Maybe they're not a number 1 overall defense, but what if he gets them to like top 10, top 8 or something? Like, I don't know. I think that's a sneaky important thing to watch this year, is what kind of jump for me. So the main character for me is actually what the defense looks like. Does Alabama's defense start to look closer to what they looked like in the height of Saban's powers in Tuscaloosa?
We shall see, sir. What was Washington last year? The 50-something ranked defense a year ago. So that wasn't Womack, but that was Kalen DeBoer's team.
Where was Kane Womack? I'm going to pull this up right now. Scoring defense. Let's see here. South Alabama, 27th. Yeah, they were 27th in the country. Better than Clemson. Oklahoma here,
different
Matt Green.
competition, but for sure.
Oklahoma. The main character for you for the Oklahoma Sooners this upcoming season will be who, Matt Green?
I took the easy one on this one. It's got to be Jackson Arnold because that's just what this team is going to come down to. Obviously, this defense was improved a year ago, and they're definitely going to need to be more improved again. But I feel like I'm trusting Brent Venables. I was going back and looking at some of those Oklahoma defenses under Venables in the mid 2000s, and it was just, oh man, it was crazy seeing Oklahoma with the top 20 defense in some of those years. I think top 10 one year. And if Oklahoma can get back to that, I think that's a game changer. But Jackson Arnold, like obviously this guy was a 5-star by everybody coming out. I think he had like some Baker Mayfield comparisons. But maybe that's just because he went to Oklahoma. I don't know. But I think he's ultimately the X factor on this team. Like Dylan Gabriel was good. Like he didn't necessarily have to be as good as Gabriel was a year ago. Like this team's gonna have to be improved. But I think their ceiling definitely depends on if they're like a 10-win team or they're a 6-win team. I think a lot of that depends on how good Jackson Arnold is this year.
Gavin Sawchuk, I think, is going to be a good player for them again this year. Like you said, I think the receivers are good. A lot of transfers in the offensive line. We'll see how they all mesh. I think Dominic Williams is a big get in the portal from TCU. But Billy Bowman's a really good player at the safety spot. I'm most curious. I think we're in agreement that it has to be Jackson Arnold. We're like, for a lot of the same reasons we talked about Nico, is Jackson Arnold is right there. And if he is the next great Oklahoma quarterback, we've seen what that means for Oklahoma. Like, this is a blue chip team. The roster's still loaded. Brent Venables seemed to break through a little bit. Seth Luttrell now, the new OC with Jeff Lebby going over to Mississippi State. I'm very curious. I mean, this is a team that beat Texas last year. Gabriel had a really good year. If Jackson Arnold is the next great Oklahoma quarterback, guess what? Oklahoma is going to be pushing for the college football playoff this year. Like, Oklahoma will be pushing for 10-2, 9-3, 11-1, somewhere in that range, because we've seen this story before. Like, Oklahoma, like, it's something you and I talked about, where there's like Texas has broken through and they made the college football playoff last year. That's all great. However, Oklahoma has been the steadier program. They have the history that Texas, I think, it's not that Texas is saying that they have that same history, but it feels like Texas and Oklahoma have just been going back and forth for decades. It's just been like these two powerhouse Big 12 programs, this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, one of them has had their act together and has just consistently made the playoff and put Heisman Trophy guys out there, winning national titles, finding themselves into multiple double-digit win seasons, and just a stable program where they hire really well, their coaches do well, they stay for a while. Like, it's been good. Like, Oklahoma has just been a steady Eddie, great program, elite program in college football for our entire lifetime. So I'm curious what actually happens here with Venables and company coming into the SEC this year, because Jackson Arnold, I think the talent is there, and if he is the next great Oklahoma quarterback, then Oklahoma is gonna, like, they're a good bet to make the college football playoff, because I've seen it so many times, Matt Green.
No, I think that's fair. It is funny how those two programs have the perception seems to be like Texas has won like one national title in the last like 50 years. Like, yes. Oklahoma's won like each decade, just about multiple, like 7 Heisman winners throughout the history, which that doesn't necessarily mean everything. That's individual, but still, Oklahoma's the one with the full trophy case.
Yeah, and just the consistency of winning. It's not even just like all the trophies. It's just they win all the time. Like, it looks weird. There's no down Oklahoma years, Matt Green. Like, it's one of those things that they have just dominated. I mean, I understand 6-6 in 2022, but that was the first year of Venables. Like, the 2020 year was the only year Lincoln Riley did not win double-digit games, and we don't even count that one because it's the COVID year, and he still went 9-2. Bob Stoops won less than 10 games. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3 times since winning the national title in 2000. You look at it, John Blake was a disaster in the late 90s, but Barry Switzer, we know about how that worked, and Bud Wilkinson, and then you go into obviously Bob Stoops, like Riley and company, but I don't know, like Oklahoma.
This is probably the longest it's ever been without them winning a national title, and they've been
Yeah.
like a top 5-6 program in the sport over the last like 20 years.
Yeah, 100%. Matt Green, LSU, the main character will be who?
I got to go with Harold Perkins. And obviously, he's just one guy on the defense. And so a lot of it, how's he going to be used? Is he going to be more of an edge rusher like he was his freshman year? That remains to be seen. I think he should be, because I feel like there were times last year where you didn't even know he was on the field. Like he was not making the same impact he was in 2022. But he's just symbolic for just this defense. Like, this LSU has to have an identity of some sort of pulse defensively. Like this, there's no way they can be as good as they were on offense last year. I don't know. They won't be as dynamic, I'm sure, with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and all that. But they can't be as bad as they were on defense a year ago. And I think Harold Perkins is the leader of this defense. Like, LSU's got to get back to being, a top 5 defense in the SEC. There's no excuse, honestly.
But do you think they have the personnel? I think I saw 2 scholarship defensive tackles or something, and they didn't really address that in the portal. Like we talked about Williams, who ended up at Oklahoma out of TCU. Like you said, it's just weird to see just how bad that defense was a year ago, and you kind of wasted another all-time great quarterback and offense at LSU. Like, I'm not worried about LSU and Garrett Nussmeier and company. I think they're gonna be great. They were 81st in scoring defense last year. Like, that's just terrible. They were worse than Arkansas. You're worse than Akron. You're worse than Wake Forest. You're worse than Kansas, Kentucky. Like, you go up and down the list, schools that you should not be worse than on the defensive side of the ball, because of all the, like you talk about, like all of the talent in Baton Rouge and how well they're recruiting. I mean, they added DJ Pickett and Derek Meadows. Like, they're recruiting really well. Like, it's another thing where it's like LSU is going to be fine down the line. I think you and I are still pretty optimistic about what Brian Kelly's building in Baton Rouge. But like you said, can LSU fans take another terrible year on the defense side of the ball? Like, you made a big defensive head coaching change. And I think that's why my main character, and it kind of blends into your Harold Perkins thing, is Blake Baker. Like, that's a huge win. And that's something that people are overlooking with Mizzou, is just assuming that Mizzou doesn't have a drop off there in that regard. And I think that's something to watch, is like, I think people are going to look at Garrett Nussmeier and look at the offense, this and the other. I'm curious what LSU's defense looks like, because I think if LSU is going to make a push to make the SEC title game and get back to real contention, the defense cannot be what it was. The defense has to make a jump, and I just don't know if they have it in them this year. I think LSU is still like an 8-4, 9-3 team to me. I don't think they have the defensive personnel this year to be one of those elite defenses. I think they could get there next year, maybe the year after. But it is weird that Brian Kelly coach team is just so offense centric, and it's just, I think their offense is going to be a lot of fun again, but I don't trust this defense. I don't trust, I got to see it with Harold Perkins. I think Baker was a good hire, but it's asking a lot for him to turn this around right away. And I think it's definitely the main character to watch for LSU and Tiger fans. It's like, are they going to be okay with another bad defensive season, even if the offense is great? And I don't know the answer to that. I guess it depends on the wins.
And to be fair to LSU, like, they did go 10-3 last season, and the 3 teams they lost to were a Florida State team that went undefeated. That was, one of the best teams in college football, maybe the best team in college football. We really don't know, right?
Yeah.
If their quarterback was healthy. It's obviously a little different when they played Georgia, but we won't get into that. Ole Miss, they lost in a shootout, like 50-something to 40-something, like. And then they lost to Alabama. So this team, with as bad of a defense as they had, they still did go 10-3. So it doesn't necessarily take the most improvement. It'll probably take more, because we don't think this offense is going to be as dynamic. But the offense doesn't necessarily have to be as dynamic if people aren't just scoring at will. I mean, how many points? Florida put up 35 on them. Like, it was just everyone was able to score a lot of points on this team, and that's definitely going to be the talking point. Is just going to. All anyone is going to care about this LSU team is how improved they are defensively.
Next up here, the Auburn Tigers, Matt Green. I kind of cheated on this one, but I kind of want to hear yours and see if they coalesce here, Matt Green.
I did not choose the same person as you. I chose the true freshman wide receiver, Cam Coleman. This dude is just an absolute freak. Like Jeremiah Smith is the number one receiver in this last year's class. Any other year, Cam Coleman is probably the number one receiver in the country. And like Peyton Thorne, I don't have much confidence for how much better Peyton Thorne can be. I do have confidence in Hugh Freeze and just how good of an offensive mind he is in designing something, a little bit better than it was a year ago. Maybe he develops Peyton Thorne a little bit. But I think to have a just absolute dude, just number one wide receiver like Cam Coleman, I think that can do wonders for Peyton Thorne's development. So I think seeing on Auburn offense be more dynamic, passing the ball, like I think that's what they're going to need to see in 2024.
That's interesting. Hugh Freeze is obviously recruiting well. He's ramping that up. Auburn, I think you can make the case is the hardest team for me to put a finger on. Year two, like we talk about the year two bumps, and like we've seen that with Tennessee, we've seen it with Ole Miss, we've seen it with a lot of programs. I can't do it with Auburn. Like I look at it, and a lot of it's just Peyton Thorne, my main character. Like it's a combination of Peyton Thorne and Jaquez Hunter, because I think Hunter could be the best running back in the SEC this year. Like I think he's a really, really talented player. And Hugh Freeze has gotten a lot out of his quarterbacks, obviously in the past, but also just dynamic offenses. Like I wonder if there was a program to like use those freshmen and just kind of like get some talent on the field to just kind of even things out. Auburn and Hugh Freeze would be my pick to like see Cam Coleman on the field earlier than later, right? Like I could see that. I could see Auburn just being like, we got to get some talent on the field. We got to get some game breakers. We have to do something to shake things up. But I think Auburn is so complicated because Peyton Thorne, it's just kind of crazy to think about how we all see him, right? Because we saw a really good version of Peyton Thorne with Mel Tucker at Michigan State. Like that wasn't that long ago. We weren't looking at Peyton Thorne as like this albatross, like you don't know how you're going to win with him. Last year was a disaster, but he came in super late. He was a late spring transfer. We've seen that be a little bit more difficult for guys coming in the spring versus coming in the winter and getting that full offseason of work and rapport with the receivers and the coaches, this, that, and the other. There's reason to me for optimism. The weirdest thing was that he was really good running the football, right? Like he did that a lot in the Georgia game, obviously. Just kind of, he was more of a dynamic.
I think it was just the Georgia game. It may be the Alabama game. It was very strange. I think he had an out-of-body experience in that Georgia game.
And I mean, you talk about it, like Kirby talks about it, like that game was just, that game was very winnable. Auburn was 124th in passing offense last year. And they had this talent. Like Auburn's offense was objectively terrible. So I struggle with Auburn. So I wonder, on one hand, I'm like, the offense has to be better, or the passing game has to be better. But on the other hand, I'm like, I think they're going to be able to run the ball really well. I think they're going to be one of the better running teams in the conference. I think Hunter is a really, really talented player. I don't know. I guess the main character to me, I'm going to settle on it, is just kind of, it's got to be Peyton Thorne, because Peyton Thorne, year two, does he have a jump? Do we get closer to what we saw at Michigan State in that great year with Mel Tucker? Or does he go back to what we saw last year for the most part? And then Auburn has to make a uncomfortable QB change. Like, I don't know. Is Peyton Thorne Auburn's, I don't know who's the best comp here for the situation Auburn's in, because I feel like Auburn is just ready to get
Devin
to next
Leary
year.
Or Tyler Van Dyke.
Where you're like this stopgap, and we're like, we know we can't win the conference this year, but next year, because you could sell me on Auburn being a 9-10 win team in the SEC next year. I think they have the talent. I think they're going to be pretty loaded on both sides of the ball to maybe make a run in year 3 or 4 if you freeze. But this year, they're just hard to read. I don't know what's the most realistic path for them right now. So I'm going to stick with Peyton Thorne.
Yeah, and of all the programs to not get a transfer quarterback, obviously Peyton Thorne was a transfer last year, but like Auburn was getting transfers before the portal even happened. Like their OG transfer QBU. So I don't know, just like with all the QBs in the transfer portal this past year, Auburn was like linked to so many guys, and then they just never upgraded at that position.
It is funny that you say that because I'm like, I was doing the math in my head. I mean, I guess Jason Campbell's the best homegrown quarterback in the 21st century for Auburn. And then obviously the two national title, one winner, one loser in the national title, but Nick Marshall and Cam Newton being transfers pretty well.
Yeah, and Stidham was a transfer too.
Stidham, yeah. It's true. OG transfer portal quarterback U. I had not put that at Auburn, but I think you're right. I like that.
And just in general, I feel like it was kind of a thing. Guys get kicked
Kentucky's
off
doing that now more than
somewhere,
anybody
maybe
in the SEC, right?
Georgia, and then Auburn go pick them up. Say
I think
what?
Kentucky's given up. Kentucky's like, we're just going to take a transfer quarterback every year in the Stoops era. That's what we're doing. Like Kentucky's done it 3 straight times.
Oh shoot, I guess I forgot that what's his name? From a couple years ago. Man, why am I blanking on Will Levis? I forgot he was a transfer too.
That's what I'm saying. 3 straight years. Yeah, they'll have Brock.
Yeah.
And then who was before Will Levis?
No, it was Leary. Leary was the last one.
No, I'm saying before Will Levis. Who was the quarterback at Kentucky?
Oh shoot, who was the Kentucky quarterback? I don't know. I got to look that one up.
I don't know either.
Was that 2020, 2019?
Oh, wow. I'm looking at this. Okay. Sawyer Smith and Lynn Bowden. Bowden, that was because everybody got hurt, right? And they had to move.
Yeah, he had that year where he rushed for like 1,400 yards or something that year, right? Yeah. Bowden, right?
Yeah, Lynn Bowden. Goodness gracious. Terry Wilson. Now, that is a name I've not heard in a long time.
Terry Wilson. That's who I was trying to come up with.
Yeah, but the last 3 here transfers. So we'll see if that continues for the Kentucky Wildcats. Texas A&M, your main character, Matt Green.
A&M, I think this is an easy one. Just because of the injury factor is Connor Wegman. Because, I mean, it's just this guy could potentially be the best quarterback in the SEC. Like, that's high praise, but he's been really good when he's played, and he just can't really stay on the field. So I think that remains to be seen. This under Jimbo Fisher, they obviously underachieved. So Mike Elko in year 1 is, I guess, probably the main story. But I think Connor Wegman, if he can be dynamic, like this roster is good. So if they can actually get good quarterback play, like this might not be as long of a rebuild as some might expect.
Yeah, I like the Connor Wegman thing because you and I, we talked about it. Like he was succeeding in a tough situation with A&M last year. He has real potential. Clint Goss, NFL draft writer on Twitter, was like, Houston's Donovan Smith and Texas A&M's Connor Wegman are the best contenders with UGA's Carson Beck for 2025 NFL QB draft, QB1 for 2025. I mean, that's high praise. Like there's a lot of juice there. And I mean, you look at where he was in total QBR, he was up there last year. Connor Wegman, you just look at the stats and then you just look at kind of what the landscape is and the situation. I mean, it's not like Texas A&M had a mass exodus. Like they're going to have a lot of talent. I don't know. I think Wegman is the X factor for A&M. I also think he's just going to be really good. I think it's a weird situation because you see Haynes King too, right? Where those situations kind of annoy you if you're an A&M fan. You're like, because you never know. Like the quarterback roulette and just trying to find the right guy and stick with them and be comfortable. Haynes King was balling out at Georgia Tech last year, and he really worked out. And I think he's going to have a big year for the Yellow Jackets this year. But Connor Wegman, if he can stay healthy, has more upside than Haynes King. I think it could be a win-win situation of the Haynes King versus Connor Wegman battle. But it comes down to him just staying healthy. If Connor Wegman's healthy, it kind of is funny that the two Texas powerhouses can get to where they want to go if their quarterbacks just can stay healthy for all 12 regular season games, right? Like Wegman and Ewers, both fan bases are just like, we feel good about our quarterback. We just need them to be on the field. we need these two quarterbacks to be on the field for us to feel really good about our season.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think with what Elko's going to bring to that defense, I think that defense should be good again next year, or this year, I should say.
Absolutely. Mississippi State here, Matt Green. A program, I'm going to go first here. Can I go first here on Mississippi State?
Yeah, hit me.
All right. This is going to be kind of like my high horse. And I'm going to throw this out here with how I talked about Tennessee and people picking Tennessee for 7 in the conference, and my whole spiel that I'm not going to relitigate here towards the end of this program, Matt Green. People are disrespecting Mississippi State, and it's starting to really annoy me because Mississippi State, every year it seems like, I mean, last year the bottom fell out with Zach Arnett. That was one where you just, it kind of felt like it. It felt like the bottom was going to fall out, that it was a weird fit to go defense. It was weird that they got rid of the air raid and all the stuff that went on with that. It was just all weird. There was just bad. Like, you were kind of worried about how Will Rogers would work in this kind of new system at the very end of it. Like, it just all was weird. It was a weird year, and it was easy to bet against them last year. All Mississippi State does every year is find their way to the middle in the West. They never bottom out. Like, last year was one of the bottom out type years, and they still didn't finish last in the West. Mississippi State, since 2008, the Bulldogs have won less than 6 games just twice. Twice. Like, if you're putting them at number 15 in the conference, you're expecting them to go like 2-10, 3-9. Jeff Lebby's going to have that offense rolling. I think they're going to be fine. Mississippi State, their entire program football ethos is overachievement. That is what the Mississippi State Bulldogs do. They overachieve. I'm not saying they're going to win the SEC. I'm just saying the people who are putting them at 15th, they're going to be wrong. Mississippi State is not going to be the 15th best team in the SEC this year. I don't know how many times we have to see it in the 21st century. This doesn't happen. Like, since the Sylvester Croom era ended, it's just not a thing. That's what they love to do. Mississippi State loves to be put last, like that bulletin board material where they're like, oh, they think we're going to be the worst team again. Here we go. They're not going to be it. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, it's hard to go win in Starkville, like the cowbells and everything else. There's just something about it where they're going to find their way to 4-4 in SEC play again. And people are going to be like, how is Mississippi State ahead of, like, I don't know, Vandy and Kentucky and South Carolina and Arkansas at the end of the year? And you're like, how did that happen? You're like, because they just fly under the radar and win games they shouldn't win. And then they just find their way to, like, maybe a bowl game. They go bowling a lot, Matt Green. I think people are disrespecting the Bulldogs. So my main character is the disrespect for Hail State history on this program. That's the main character of the 2024 season for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Bulldog fans, I got your back.
Well, I can't really beat that, but I mean, you look at what they've been, like you said, since 2008. Dan Mullen, I think have a very high opinion of Dan Mullen, you know, as one of the best offensive minds in recent years in college football. Mike Leach, I mean, if Dan Mullen's one of the best offensive minds, Mike Leach might be the best offensive mind in maybe the history of college football, right? Can Jeff Lebby come close to what either of those guys were? Like, this guy's a first-year head coach. And Mississippi State, you know, he's not taking over the healthiest program in the SEC right now. I'm definitely on the bandwagon of this team is more like the 14th, 15th best team in the conference this year. They might be better than Arkansas. They might be better than South Carolina. They could be, you know, somewhere up there, might win 4 or 5 games, but I would be a little surprised if this team goes bowling. I haven't looked at their schedule necessarily, but I mean,
so they get Florida at home. They get Florida at home. They get Arkansas at home. Here's the great thing about Mississippi State's schedule. The games that they were never going to win are all on the road. Like, the coin flip games are all at home. So they go to Georgia. They go to Texas. They go to Tennessee. They go to Ole Miss. Like, I don't think they're winning any of those games. So it's good that those are on the road. That's what you want. Like, you want the non-coin flip games to be on the road. So you want the home games where you're like, I'm not really sure if we'd win this game. They get Florida at home. They get A&M at home. They get Arkansas at home. They get Mizzou at home. Mississippi State's going to overachieve. Just put it in there, Matt Green. You can doubt the Bulldogs and the Cowbells all you want. This schedule sets up nicely for them. Like, they're going to overachieve. Book it here, folks. Mississippi State's not having back-to-back terrible seasons in the SEC. It's not happening.
Also, for those that are following the Georgia-Texas A&M Cold War that they're just never going to play in College Station, since A&M got to the SEC, this is now going to be the 4th time, and they'll play the same schedule next year. So it'll be 5 times that Georgia played Mississippi State since 2012. And they've still only played A&M that one time during the COVID year, and they still haven't gone to College Station. So I don't get it. And this is also third time in the last 4 matchups that Mississippi State is playing at Georgia also. So I don't know what they're doing. I guess they just don't even count COVID as a year of like home games because Georgia played at Alabama in 2020 also. And I guess you're like giving someone that home game back because it didn't really count. I don't know. But yeah, that's what it is. Georgia Mississippi State just seems to happen a lot. I'm not really sure why.
The Battle of the Bulldogs.
2017, 2020, 2022, now again in 2023 and 24. Or 24 and 25, I should say.
Matt Green, Ole Miss, main character. Who is it?
Ole Miss, I'm going with Walter Nolan, the transfer from Texas A&M. I think he's like the 3rd ranked player in 24/7's transfer portal rankings. He's kind of more like the Harold Perkins one. He's not necessarily the guy on defense. You got to have a unit. It's not just necessarily about one guy. But I think with as good as Ole Miss has been under Lane Kiffin, what they've been lacking is that elite line of scrimmage. And I think with Walter Nolan, I think, if they can actually be that team with the serious run stopper and actually have one of the better defenses in the conference, with Lane Kiffin's offense, like this could be the year. I feel like Ole Miss, the stars are aligning. This might be as good as it ever gets in 2024 with how things are lining up for Ole Miss. So does that mean they go to the college football playoff, or does that mean it's another 10-win season? We'll see. But I think Walter Nolan is what Ole Miss has been missing. They just haven't had that dynamic on their team with these good since Lane Kiffin has been there.
Yeah. It's hilarious looking at their roster. Ole Miss is a hilarious roster. Like just the amount of transfers that they have brought in, it's unbelievable. Like this is something you see like in year one of a new coach when he takes over. Like this is how it looked for year one for Heupel when he took over and lost 30 guys. Like the turnover is just unbelievable. And it's just kind of funny how we look at them versus Colorado, but I think they've done a better job as a whole than Colorado plugging pieces and all that kind of stuff. But
it feels like they just have a better foundation.
Yes.
To add portal guys to.
I would agree. I think you're right about Walter Nolan. So I think it's a combination of Nolan and Princely, right? So one of the things you saw, because what stood out to you? I think the way to look at it is like when you remember Ole Miss, Georgia last year. And I think Lane Kiffin and Mark Stoops, after they've lost to Georgia recently, have said kind of the same thing where they're like, what do you want us to do with what we have? We've maximized what we can with NIL, with our resources, with what's feasible. Then we need more money. We need better talent, this, that, and the other. They mean the trenches, right? So I look at that game last year. Was it the defensive line? Like, is that something that you could see shifting how this game goes this time around this year with Ole Miss and Georgia? Is Princely and Walter Nolan and those dudes on the defensive line enough to even that game out? Because I think a lot of people are talking themselves into that being a close game down the stretch of Georgia Ole Miss. But that game wasn't close last year. And I think a lot of people are just buying in a lot because it's going to be in Oxford this fall and go a little bit different. I don't know. I just don't know if Princely and Walter Nolan are enough to really swing this in my estimation. Do you agree with that, Matt Green?
Yeah, I'm not sure it swings the result of the Georgia game. Like it could make Ole Miss a much more legitimate like championship contender, but yeah, I mean that Georgia game a year ago, that's probably one of the more like flawless offensive performances I can remember. Like I think it was 300 yards passing and 300 yards rushing in that game. Like put up a 50 spot. So Ole Miss did have a lot of success running the ball on Georgia, especially early, but I want to say it was close early, right? And then Georgia just blew the brakes up. I want to say like mid-second quarter. After that, it was kind of, what was it, 28? So it was 28-14 at halftime, and then 52-17 final score. So yeah, it would definitely make a difference in that 300 rushing total. And Georgia's still a question mark. And like with Bowers and McConkey, like you're losing 2 elite playmakers. So Georgia could be a little less dynamic offensively in 2024, even though they obviously still have Carson Beck back.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's going to be very fascinating to see what that Pete Golding defense looks like with this much infusion of talent, a lot of transfer talent. But Princely and Walter Nolan are big time gets to that defensive line. Like the Ole Miss should have a good to great defense this year, but I think all eyes are going to be on offense. Jackson Dart, could he be a Heisman type quarterback? Like Juice Wells, what does he mean? Trey Harris, we know, is one of the best receivers in the conference. Like, I think Ole Miss's offense is going to be fine. I am curious what that jump means for Ole Miss and what that does in those big games against teams like Georgia, because maybe it makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't, because look, Tennessee they had a really good defensive line last year against Georgia at home, and that didn't do anything. Like Tennessee was not able to utilize that against the Dogs' offensive line last year. So we'll see if it's different with Ole Miss's talented transfers that they brought in. It's something that one of the many reasons I'm very, very excited to see Ole Miss Georgia this fall.
And Alabama's been a big roadblock in front of Ole Miss's success a lot of years, and they don't have Alabama on the schedule in 2024. And psychologically, that might just do something for you to not see that automatic L on the schedule every year since Hugh Freeze left.
Yeah, but I mean, right now I would still put in Georgia as an automatic L until I see a very different type of game from Ole Miss against the Dogs. Arkansas. Who is your main character, and is it Bobby Petrino, Matt Green?
It's funny you said Petrino, because I went with Sam Pittman, because I think that's just going to be the storyline all year. And I don't know who's going to be talked about more, Bobby Petrino or Sam Pittman. But, they go at Oklahoma State early in the season. Like, I feel like that's the type of game that could really, buy a lot of goodwill. If Arkansas is able to find a way to somehow beat Oklahoma State early on, get like a 3-0 start, maybe a 5-7 SEC, finish to the season. Maybe it doesn't sting quite so bad. But they're obviously trying to get to a bowl game. But I think it's going to be like, a weekly watch of Sam Pittman's hot seat. I think his seat is just about hotter than I think anyone in the SEC, because Napier's the only other one that's right there with him, in my opinion, just because. But Napier still has it's still early and, we're kind of building. Let's trust the process. It feels like Pittman, what is he, 2 years? He's been there 2 years longer than Napier. So it's, he's built up more losing seasons here. So I'm not sure how much we all love Sam Pittman, but I'm not sure how much more time they can really give him.
Yeah, and it's the reason I put Petrino as mine is so Taylor Green, I think, is going to be a really good player for them. I think he was good at Boise. I could see him like Petrino with quarterbacks. Not going to doubt that one too. Like there are some coaches across the country that it just look, if that guy wants you, then he's probably gonna be pretty good. Like I feel pretty comfortable with him identifying talent, quarterback talent especially. So I think Taylor Green's gonna be really good for Arkansas this fall for Petrino. That being said, I think it's just such a weird dynamic because Petrino's already been the coach there, right? We've seen, the Shianos of the world go back to Rutgers. It's not out of the question that guys take over the head coaching job at their school, at the school they were previously head coaches at multiple times. But it's a little weird. Doesn't happen all that often.
It's got to be unheard of to do it twice, though.
Well, Shiano did it.
But he did Louisville twice. And then if he potentially coaches Arkansas twice, has anyone ever done that?
I hadn't even thought about that.
If they do, the Falcons need to give him a third, pull the hat trick. You can go to all the spots twice.
Well, that's kind of the favorite, right? Doesn't it feel like this is just a weird gap year where you kind of want the bottom to fall out, but you kind of don't, so you can just make the change to Petrino going into next year? Like, I would be very surprised if Bobby Petrino is not the head coach of Arkansas next year, wouldn't you? No matter how the season goes, because I don't think Arkansas is going to be contending for the SEC. And at that point, I'm also just not a belief. Like, I just think more and more ADs, GMs, whatever, you either believe in the guy or you don't. So if you brought in Petrino because he's a head coach in waiting, then that's just how it's going to be. So nothing Sam Pittman can do is going to save his job if you brought in Petrino thinking he's the next guy. Like, he's always going to be looking over his shoulder. Like, you're going to make that move eventually anyway. I don't know why you wouldn't go to Barry Odom, though, because Barry Odom, we look at why Arkansas kind of has really faltered in the Pittman era, it was losing Barry Odom to UNLV. He was such a home run hire for Sam Pittman right out of the gate at Arkansas. Losing him to UNLV, where he's been great, was a bummer. Like, I think that would have been really helpful for Sam Pittman to have Odom alongside him for at least a couple more years. But that being said, Petrino, I don't see a scenario where this offense isn't good and Petrino doesn't do enough, even if the wins don't come. Like, the weird thing about Arkansas last year, remember how many close games they were in? Didn't they give Alabama hell, unless I'm misremembering? Wasn't that game super close late? Wasn't Arkansas just in a bunch of one-score games?
They made that one close late. Yeah, I think Alabama was up like 21-3 in the third or fourth quarter, but yeah, it ended up being like 23-20 or something like that. I could look that up.
So they're not far away. So I don't know. Arkansas, to me, like, their best case scenario is 8-4. But I think more 6-6. And if that's the case, then it's probably gonna be Petrino's show. But I don't know. I think Petrino's gonna be the main character because I do think this Arkansas offense is gonna be really good with him and Taylor Green. I just don't think it's gonna matter in the win column. And I don't know. I can't shake the feeling that Bobby Petrino is just gonna be the head coach at Arkansas going into next year.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean as far as that goes. So going back, starting in week 3 last year, they lost to BYU 38-31, lost to LSU 34-31, lost to A&M by 12, lost to Ole Miss 27-20, lost to Alabama 24-21, and then lost to Mississippi State 7-3, and then beat Florida 39-36 for their only conference win of the season. And then got blown out by Auburn, blown out by Missouri to finish the season. But yeah, so I don't know. I think I kind of come from it from two perspectives. It's if Sam Pittman is the one who made the hire, like, well, we're not necessarily going to make our next head coaching hire based on who the head coach we just hired as his OC, right? So you're not necessarily going to let Pittman choose the next coach. Maybe you view Petrino as one of the more high profile guys that will actually look at Arkansas as a good job. Maybe that's a case. On the other side, they just hired John Calipari to coach their basketball team. So maybe they're able to make a sexy hire in football if they get rid of Sam Pittman. I don't know, but we talk about Sam Pittman's one of the few people who looks at Arkansas as like a destination job. So I don't know. Maybe from that perspective, Petrino is also a guy who would kind of look at Arkansas that way too. But he never left Arkansas, I guess, right? He got fired from Arkansas after the motorcycle controversy. Did he just step down after that? Okay,
I think so. Yeah.
So he never technically left. He didn't just leave Arkansas for a bigger job. So maybe he does do it as a destination. And there's probably a ceiling on some people not wanting to ever give Petrino a second shot. I know the Falcons are in that club.
Well, he's also how old is he? By Petrino, he's got to be in his 60s, right? What is Petrino? Yeah, he's 63.
Okay, he's got
This
time.
is it. Yeah, this is it. Like, I think this is his last head coaching job if he gets it going into next year. I think this is it for Petrino.
Sam Pittman's not dead yet, sir.
I don't know. It just feels like a weird gap year. Like, it's inevitable. And it would drive me nuts if I was an Arkansas fan going into this year, because you just feel like you have a lame duck coach going into his final year because it just feels like nothing he can do will save his job. And you brought in his replacement as OC. I don't know. It just feels like a weird gap year if I'm an Arkansas fan.
Yeah, what's funny is I feel like the popular narrative is kind of like, their schedule is not as tough as it has been in recent years. And then you look at Oklahoma State, A&M on a neutral site, Tennessee at home, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, Texas at home, at Missouri. Like, I named like 5 preseason top 15 teams, I think, on there. Like, it's still going to be a brutal schedule.
Oh, the schedule. So
Alabama and Georgia on it.
I mean, at Oklahoma State, I don't think they're winning that game. For one. And then at Auburn, they won't be favored. At A&M, they won't be favored. Tennessee at home, they won't be favored.
Well, A&M's neutral site, but yeah.
LSU at home won't be favored. At Mississippi State, won't be favored. Ole Miss at home, won't be favored. Texas at home, won't be favored. Louisiana Tech at home, they'll be favored there. And then at Missouri, they won't be favored. It's going to be a bad season for Arkansas. Anyone who's saying it's not a bad schedule for Arkansas, I don't know. I don't know what
That's
to say
true.
about
I
that
don't
one.
see an automatic win on that entire conference schedule.
No.
And Oklahoma State isn't great out of conference. Isn't a good one out of
Oklahoma State can
conference
win the
either.
Big 12.
And UAB, don't sleep on the Blazers.
Don't sleep on the Blazers, man. I mean, you got to win that one, or the Sam Pittman might not make it to November here.
Also, they're playing Arkansas Pine Bluff in Little Rock. Usually they reserve like at least one big home game in the conference to play in Little Rock. But I guess they're doing it with the Arkansas Pine Bluff game in the opener Thursday night.
Well, that's it, Matt Green. That's all I've got. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up here tonight?
That's all I got, sir.
All right, Matt Green. This was fun. This is a fun exercise. And going to next week, I think it's time to get into our conference previews and our picks and putting our over-unders and all that on papers, win-loss totals. I think it's time to do it for the Big Four here over the next couple weeks.
Absolutely, sir. It is almost a month till college football season. So we're getting there.
All right. Matt Green, always a pleasure. And I will talk to you next week.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.